So before we begin, I'm gonna give you a little riddle. Do you see my legs? Are my legs seen? Really, actually. Not really. Okay, this should be fine. No, not really. Oh, never mind. What was I trying to show you with my body? I'm gonna try again. Yeah, it sucks because you can't see my legs, but what if I do this? You get it? Number 2, baby, number 2. Now, you're probably wondering, what in God's name is she talking about? Good question. That was just a little bit for my entertainment, you know? 2 is actually a very special number, okay? And that's related to this video. And this video is basically a recap. Damn coffee machine. This video is basically a recap of everything that I've read in the past couple months. So we're talking March, April. I'm gonna tell you why 2 is a interesting number. Or rather, interesting for me in this context. It's not really that important. I just find it an interesting pattern. But before I tell you, I'm just gonna settle in my seat, grab my coffee. Cheers to that. This is not any special mug. It is just a mug. It is an oat milk latte. However hard I try not to be part of the mold, I have succumbed to the tastiness of oat milk lattes. What's special about this month is that most of the books I've read are just really new favorites. As in, like, I'm like, how am I gonna ever wrap up the year? You know what I'm saying? It's gonna be hard because all of these books are honestly great. Like, there was no disappointments. Maybe there's one that I would have a criticism of, which I will tell you in a second. So 2, why 2? 2, because many of these authors, it's either the second time I read them this year, or I've read 2 of their books in a month. In the past 2 months. Sorry, I don't know how to calculate anymore. So there's a lot of pairs. I kind of want to talk about them not in the order that I've read maybe, but more in just bundle it up. So in no particular order whatsoever, here are the most amazing books ever. So I'm gonna start with the single books, meaning those whose author I just read once, if that makes sense. We got The White Album by Joan Didion, which I have been meaning to read for a long time. I have only read Slouching Towards Bethlehem, Blue Night, which I was afraid to read because I have a daughter, and it was like, I'm not sure I'm ready for that. But yeah, I of course it's Joan Didion. My God, how good is she? She's so good. I have read Slouching Towards Bethlehem many years ago, in my early 20s. And I remember loving it. I remember being so taken by her prose, by her way of telling a story. In this collection, she talks about a dam in the West, you know, in Los Angeles. She talks about scarcity of water and things like that. And the way that she mixes her, you know, personal thoughts and opinions and emotions about things without sort of like putting it in your face in a way, no self-righteousness. She's not imposing anything, and yet her presence as an author is so strong. You want to read good essays? Read Joan Didion. I have actually seen recently a post on social media, on Instagram, an interview of Joan Didion where she was asked, I think it was an old interview because she was quite young when she was giving the interview, where she was asked how she learned how to write, and she said that she learned how to write by copying down sentences of Hemingway. And I thought that was really interesting because, not because I also copy down sentences of Hemingway, but I do tend to copy down passages of the prose that I really enjoy. And so I was like, maybe I'll copy your prose, girl. I mean, I wanna write like Joan Didion. Right? Beyond the sort of quality of the writing, I just think that whatever she's talking about, like capturing the essence of the 60s in California, in the West, is so interesting. So this opens with the titulary essay, which is The White Album, wherein she talks about, you know, Roman Polanski and Sharon Tate and that whole murder happening, and she was there, like she was at the fringes of that society. She wasn't there like in the house, but she went to the same parties as Roman Polanski and Sharon Tate. I think she even said at some point that she found it quite peculiar and interesting, and an interesting curiosity that Roman Polanski and her shared a godchild, and I found that quite interesting as well. So the White Album, if any of you are in the fence of reading Joan Didion, just because, you know, you want to be a Joan Didion hater because everybody loves her, don't be. She is great. She is loved for a reason, and I'm not gonna go against the grain with this one. I'm just not. I feel like I'm almost backtracking because this is one of the last books I've read recently, and this is as well. This is André Aciman's Room on the Sea. You might know André Aciman from Call Me By Your Name. It's a classic, I feel, at this point, at least in the social media circles that I frequent. Call Me By Your Name was great. That was everybody's favorite. This was actually like one of his other books that came out, The Gentleman from Peru, which has the same edition, same format, different cover, obviously. But they were basically first written to be audiobooks. So what you get from here is not the usual André Aciman that you get. And I actually really love André Aciman because after I read Call Me By Your Name, I was obsessed with this author. I have read a lot of his essay collections, which I think are really good. Homo Aurealis, particularly, I really enjoyed. One of the main themes that he actually explores in his books, which is the sort of liminal spaces that love opens up, that new encounters open up. He really likes to explore themes of relationships that could have happened but didn't, or unlived lives. I particularly prefer when he explores these themes in his nonfiction. I enjoyed this. I enjoy this a lot because, first of all, I was at the dentist the other day, and I was like, if I'm gonna like survive the dentist mentally, I'm just gonna like prepare myself for a consultation book so that after the dentist, I'm just gonna go to the bookstore. Oh, you know, dentists, you know, we don't like them. Actually, my dentist is really nice, but anyway. So yeah, and I got this book. I didn't know what about it at all, so it was great because I love reading him. However, I wouldn't necessarily recommend it unless you love these themes and you love Aciman. This is basically about two people in middle age, like they're already married, they have families, they have grandchildren, so they're actually later than middle age. They're sort of old. They're old and they fall in love and they meet, you know, serendipitously. Is that serendipitously? In New York, like they're part of the same. They were going to be jurors or something for a specific case or several cases, I don't really know. But they had a week there, and so they fall in love. My issue with it is that it's very rushed. Because it was made to be an audiobook, I feel like it doesn't render as well as a novel. So I feel like it's, you know, less believable than maybe his longer works. So yeah, it is more like a novella. It was extremely quick to read. It wouldn't be everybody's cup of tea. But if you like romance, I think it's just an André Aciman romance featuring old people. Next, backtracking again, an episode in the life of a landscape painter by César Aira, I believe. Now that I don't have the book with me, I have a little doubt. But that was basically exactly what the title says. It was an episode in the life of a landscape painter. I think it says in the 1800s. It's basically about this German painter, a famous German painter that actually existed, if I'm not mistaken, whose name I forget. He was a very famous landscape painter, particularly known for his landscape painting of South America, I think Mexico and Argentina and something else. He basically, traveled through South American jungles and painted landscapes. He wanted to go there to fulfill some sort of, to understand this thing. I'm very good at describing this book. I know it's a very, 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 very slim book. Again, this is also something that I've read probably in less than an hour, but it's fiction and it feels a bit surreal. So it is an episode of the life of this painter. He's just there like doing his landscape painting in the 1800s, very atmospheric. They walk around the jungle, you know, there's a tour guide, there's a cook, there's a doctor, and at some point something happens. There is a storm. I feel like if I say what happens, it's a spoiler. So it's a really interesting exploration of perspective, of what lies behind images, what lies behind painting, and also about time. I don't know why, I feel like it's related to time. Now we're gonna backtrack way back when I was still in the beautiful tropics. The Road by Cormac McCarthy. It's a classic post-apocalyptic novel. I've always wanted to read it. I've always been kind of scared to read it because I heard that it was extremely bleak. It is about post-apocalyptic America. No details about what happened. It doesn't really matter. You have a father walking with his very young son through this desolate landscape, and most people have died, but the people that do still exist are very scarce and they're dangerous. So it's those two against the world, baby. Your blood and your heart is coursing for these people. I loved it. I really loved it. It was extremely visceral. I really felt for the characters, and I had sort of the ball in my throat the whole way through. The prose is almost poetic. In a weird way, it's almost a love letter to the world that has disappeared. I had this sense of loss when I read this book, and I think that I chose this perfect setting to read it. And I think that now we're approaching the seasons where the time is perfect to read it as well if you haven't gotten to it yet. It was bleak inside, so you want it to be sunny, you want it to be good in your life. Definitely don't read this if you have any issues right now. I don't think anyone would pick it up in their right mind if they weren't in their right mind. I really just am grateful I got to it in the end, because it was one of the most spectacular books that I've read, for real. And I'm not sure I'm gonna read it again just because it was so kind of heavy. Especially that I have children of my own, it was really difficult to be confronted with that. Like, what would you actually do if like the world that you live in is so dark, and like it's almost a plea for hope, a case for hope when it seems like there's none at all. Because it's so bleak, trust me, it's so bleak. And yeah, oh my gosh, that book was just fantastic. It's really good, trust me on this. Another book that I read in the Philippines was A Map to the Next World by Joy Harjo. Joy Harjo! I love that name. I just love that name. Joy Harjo. Yeah, Joy Harjo is great. She's a poet. She's a Native American poet. She wrote a lot of prose and memoirs, and she wrote a lot of poetry collections. And this was a kind of mix of both. A lot of her books are actually a mix of both. And that's what I love about her. And it really confronted me with like, what is possible? You can write prose and then you can, you know, ornate it with poems. Why not? And it's amazing. She is a very spiritual person. She's very connected to her roots, to Native American spirituality. She's very mystical, and she carries that in her words, in her poems, and in her books. And this one particularly examines the transition that has been happening, ongoing. I don't know, the transition that humanity is facing right now, which she feels is a very spiritual sort of shift between like the old ways and the humanity being really grounded and connected to Earth. Yeah, towards the next world, which is full of technology and unknowns and perhaps disconnection. I've read a lot of her books, of her prose books particularly in the past. I really love this one, although I would say that it feels I don't want to criticize her because this book was great, but it does feel a bit repetitive, and each book you kind of get kind of the same thing as the last one. You know, it's the same vibe. So if you like it, you're gonna go back to them eventually. I really loved her book on writing, Catching the Light, which I talked about in another video, which I will either post before or after this, about books on writing. Anyway, Joy Harjo has written some of my favorite poems. Now we're back to the present moment, and I'm gonna talk about Tove Jansson again. I have been talking about her for the past several videos. That's how it goes, right? When I love an author or a book, I'm gonna talk about it forever. Like the whole year I'm going to talk about her, and I love it. I love it. I don't want to stop talking about her. Listen to me. This is great. She's great. The summer book, Tove Jansson. I have read and I have talked about reading Fair Play of hers, one of her other novels for adults, because she's originally a children's author. She wrote the whole Moomins collection. It's just the second book I read of hers, but I'm obsessed. It reminds me of my obsession with Natalia Ginzburg and Elena Ferrante back at that year when I was reading a lot of Italian literature. I feel like this year I'm reading a lot of Nordic literature, which is great, you know, each year has its own theme. So the summer book is about a grandmother and her granddaughter. Sophia, who is a 6-year-old girl, I think throughout the novel, and her grandmother. who I think is based on the mother of Tove Jansson. There's this little family. The father of Sophia is also in the book, but he's not part of the dialogues. He's just like sort of peripheral character. So it really focuses on that relationship, which I love so much. Not just because I have a very deep relationship with my own grandmother. Now I have very small kids, and I just visited my grandparents last week. They're 80 years old and my daughter is 3 years old. And when I was there, I was thinking about the fact that they were really at the edge of life. You know, in a way, they're at like the corners, they're at the borders of life. My grandparents are gonna die soon. I mean, let's not embellish it. They're 80 years old. Of course, they're gonna die relatively soon. And my daughter has just been born 3 years ago. And so being with, like, in the presence of like people that have such a gap in age and being in the middle of that, and also sort of seeing the dynamic between all of us, I thought was really interesting. I feel like there's something in our society that is lacking these days, at least in the West. I don't think this is really the case in some other countries. We kind of lost touch with family, not necessarily family, but we're not used to living with different generations anymore. Back in the days, we used to, you know, even if you weren't living, like, let's say if you weren't connected necessarily with your whole village, at least you were connected, you know, with the old people, with your grandparents, and then you had your children, and then there was everybody in between. And we're living in close quarters. Now maybe we see each other in the West, you know, for like family gatherings and stuff like that. But it has nothing to do with actually living together. But I just found that really interesting, that there would be this gap between these two, and the love that the grandmother has for her grandchild, and the love that the grandchild has for her grandmother, how she looks up to her. They're vacationing in this island, in one of these Finnish peninsulas. There's a bunch of islands there. And so you already have this very interesting atmosphere of the sea, it being a very tiny island where I think there's not even any running water. There's people passing by with boats because there's probably other islands around. They're just, you know, spending their days talking and swimming. Each chapter in this book is sort of an episode, so it's episodic and dreamy, and it flows so well. Like, even if there's no continuity and no necessarily any plot, I was still like wrapped. And it reminds me that actually I've recently gotten another one of her books, Notes from an Island. I haven't read yet, and I'm very excited to read. I think Tove Jansson is gonna be my author for the year. Among other authors, apparently. This is her notes from living in an island. I think it's from a different island than the one that the summer book is based on. And she lived with her partner that I think is nicknamed Tootie, who was an artist. Tuulikki Pietilä. I love that name! Oh my gosh! That is the cutest name, and the nickname is just amazing. Like, Tootie. Imagine that was my nickname. Hey Tootie, what's up? Anyway, it's beautiful because it contains notes and illustrations, notes from Tove Jansson, and I think illustrations of her partner, of the sea there. Oh, they're all in the same sort of monochrome. It reminds me a little bit of a book that I talked about, one of my favorites last year, which was from Mary Oliver, Our World. So yeah, man, Tove Jansson. Now we're in the pairs. We're entering the territory of the pairs. Italo Calvino. I have read these books in the Philippines. Invisible Cities, 6 Memos for the Next Millennium. This is fiction. Very hard to classify Calvino. And this is 6 Memos for the Next Millennium. It was a series of lectures. This is a book on writing, growing my collection of books on writing. So Invisible Cities is fragments of urban description. They're basically all descriptions of imaginary cities with beautiful names of women. Basically, the setting is that it's Marco Polo describing these beautiful, intricate, crazy, surreal sort of cities to Kublai Khan. And Kublai Khan thirsts for this information, he thirsts for this knowledge, he wants to know. He wants to know about these cities. So you have these description of cities interspersed with conversations between Kublai Khan and Marco Polo. And in the end, you realize all these cities that he's talking about are just actually basically versions of Venice. And Venice apparently is magic. So it's a very floaty kind of book, and it really explores this theme of the city. Like, what does a city represent? I've grown up and I've lived in Paris for a really long time. And every time I go back, today, I feel like I'm discovering another version of Paris. And I feel like that's probably the case for many people that have relationships with big cities like New York or Berlin or, you know, whatever, like any kind of big city, or not even just big cities, just cities in general. They have so many layers, and yet things change. People change. You grow up, you project different things as you grow older, and you meet different people, and people come and go. And then we have 6 memos for the next millennium. I was really... I like this book a lot. I feel like it was something that I probably should have taken more time with. Either that or I should reread it again, and I probably will read it several times. I would say it's a bit heavy in ideas, but very rich and very informative. If you're a writer and if you are interested about, you know, authors at work and their perspectives on writing, this is a great book. But I wouldn't say it's light, and I wouldn't say it's that easy to interpret. And this is his advice for writers for the next millennium. So the past couple of months, I also read 2 books of Karl Ove Knausgaard. A Man in Love, which is part of his My Struggle series, and Spring, which is part of his seasonal quartet series. I read Spring in the Philippines. I left it there, I believe, and I have just finished this one on audiobook. I started it like with the physical copy, and then I started to listen to the audiobook because I read the first one with audiobook and I really liked the narration. So Karl Ove Knausgaard is one of those authors like Tove Jansson. He's Norwegian. I have started to read him last year. I think I started... What did I start with? Yeah, I actually started with his book on writing called Inadvertence, and I was so taken aback. I loved it so much. It was like one of the most helpful, really one of the most helpful books on writing that I've ever read. Like the perspective that he had, that I gained from it. If you want to know more about it, you check the other video on writing, which will either come soon or before, I'm not really sure, in the time of this recording. One of the best things I've ever read about writing, and it really helped me to shape my own ideas with the projects that I'm currently working on. And so after that, I obviously was really interested in what he wrote, or what he had written. I actually read about him through Sally Rooney. In an interview, she says that this series, My Struggle series, is one of her main influences, I think, for her writing. So of course, Sally Rooney is a great novelist, and I love her work, and so I was like very intrigued. My Struggle series is basically 6, I think 5 or 6, I think 6, maybe 5, no, maybe 5, I don't remember, which are all ginormous. So it'll probably take me like a couple of years to finish them all. It's an autobiographical novel series. He recounts real memories, he talks about real people in his life, he gives his story away, but he writes about it in a novelistic manner. With scenes, he sort of writes about a memory, he latches onto that memory, and then it kind of goes in the flow. It's mainly about the struggle of writing, how he's living his life, and how his life informs and sort of clashes with his desires to write and his writing output, and how that kind of feeds off each other, particularly trying to write while being a father. In this one particularly, he really explores like young fatherhood and writing, which I find absolutely enthralling, not just because we don't have that many accounts of writers that are fathers. I myself, I'm sort of having the same struggle with trying to write and also juggling motherhood with very small children. And so I had that almost immediate kinship when I read about what it was mainly about. And one of the main things that I would say about this book is that it's rewarding. It's really good. It's really good, but I don't think it would be for everyone. It's rewarding because you can kind of get lost in the details, and it's kind of boring. It's a very specific style where he goes so much into the mundane details of life that you're almost confronted with your own mundane life. Like you read about mornings where he's just making coffee and things don't really go well, and you have to do paperwork and nothing really happens but just the struggle of living in the mundane details, and you have to read like a couple pages about it, and that way it becomes boring. But it's still so enthralling. Interesting things do happen. There are some scenes that are really like you're at the edge of your seat. They're funny, they're profound. It's interspersed with his insights on life and on his all kinds of different opinions. He really has no filter. That aspect of it is really interesting. So whenever I do get bored a little bit, I'm like, if you just finish it, it's still kind of poignant in a way. Writing about your own life in a novelistic manner is just so interesting. In some ways you feel like a voyeur, but at the same... Voyeur? I don't know always say it like that. You feel like a voyeur, but in the same time, you're like, these are just people. They could be anybody. Okay, they're real people, but you don't know them. It doesn't really matter in a way, you know? I mean, I don't know. Actually, I'm curious. What do you think? If like you feel like you're prying into people's privacy when you're reading extensive novels about them or not. And I think the last book of this series is about tackling all the backlash that he had through the publication of these books, particularly the people in his own life, the people that he writes about, because he has no filter. If he doesn't like someone, he would just say it in his book, and I'm like, that's crazy. He takes this sort of like authorial courage to the extreme. You need a bit of courage to write, especially about people or like about characters that are based on real people in your life that have marked you so much. Listen, I'm not gonna lie, if you're a writer, often those are the people that are inspiring your writing and your novels and your stories or whatever. And he just took it to the extreme, and I love that so much. This book in particular is about his relationship with another writer called Linda Bostrom, who is a working writer, I believe. She's Swedish, and it's about falling in love with her, meeting her after a writer's workshop or something, and then having kids together, you know, being a spouse to another artist, and the mood swings and all that, and it's just so rich and complex and beautiful, and I love it. I love it. What can I say? The other book I read of his was Spring. It's spring, so it was a perfect time to read it, even though I was in the Philippines and it was kind of like the endless summer there. It's a seasonal quartet. He wrote autumn, winter, spring, and summer. I started with autumn. I DNF'd winter for some reason. I don't really know why. I think I should just finish it at some point. Every book is a bit different. The first two were really like vignettes about random sort of things that he can think about, and it's his thoughts and opinions and sort of ramblings, a page or two long about a specific topic like teeth, the weather, and driving, or spider webs. I read somewhere that with the seasonal quartet, he basically just sat on his desk one morning, he made a list of topics, like just like keywords or topics that he thought were interesting to talk about, and every day he would just pick one at random and then just write about that like stream of consciousness, which I thought was a great way, like a great sort of exercise as a writer, and I should definitely try. But Spring in particular is actually about a day in the life of Knausgaard as his fourth daughter was born. So he had 3 kids at that time, and another girl was born, and he talks about, yeah, a day in the life of what they did together, the people they went to see and chat with. It really touches on something really profound. It was tender. I don't know, there's something about like writing about being a father and tending to a baby that is just so beautiful to read about. And not just because of the theme, but just because he just writes about it beautifully. Anyway, I talked about that for a really long time, and I still have all these books to talk about. Bro, I'm not gonna do this anymore. I am not gonna do 2-month wrap-ups. I'm just gonna do it every month. That's a big promise, but I'm just gonna try to do it every month. So next, Milan Kundera, baby. Milan Kundera. He's the boss. He's my idol. I cannot explain to you, I cannot express to you how much I love Milan Kundera. So many people have said that the best way to read Kundera is to actually reread him. And I understand why. There's not a lot of people, or not a lot of authors or books that I would reread. There really isn't. And the reason for that is because it takes time to reread books, but also I feel like sometimes you just get enough after one reading. But no, not with Milan Kundera, my man, my God. So Milan Kundera is a Czech author. He, I think, lived in Paris for a long time. He also wrote in French. I'm not sure if these books were originally written in French or in Czech, but I read them in English. So the first one I read was The Book of Laughter and Forgetting, and I loved it. Oh my goodness, he's so good. So The Book of Laughter and Forgetting is something that has really stuck with me very profoundly because of its very specific and intricate form. It's a novel in variations. So it's almost like a compilation of short stories, except that it explores so much the same themes that they really feel interconnected. What I love about Kundera's writing is that it's a beautiful blend of storytelling and philosophical musing, where he would write a scene charged with like emotion and setting, and the pacing would just be perfect, and you're enthralled by the characters, and even when they're imperfect, they don't piss you off for some reason. And he just has this mastery of storytelling. The command of his skill is just insane. Then he's gonna like kind of dissect what's going on between the characters, or what's going on in the scene or in their lives, and he's going to add a sort of philosophical commentary, and it's going to feel so seamless and not intrusive. I'm just marveling. This one in particular deals with memory and forgetting in the context of the Soviet occupation of Czechoslovakia and of Prague and of totalitarianism. He really reminds us that totalitarianism, or any sort of political ebbs and flows, are really linked to this quality that people have, or humans have, of remembering and forgetting, kind of like the curse of history. Everything depends upon society's capacity to remember and to forget. If you remember too much, it's also a trap, because you can fight the fight of generations before and they have nothing to do with you almost. But at the same time, if you forget, it's also a trap, because then, you know, cycles perpetuate and repeat themselves. So I like that he explores that in this. Something he also does in this book, Immortality. He takes like famous people, he puts them in a scene. Here we have, for example, a whole chapter about a bunch of poets that are in a bar, and you know, they're like, there's Goethe and there's Petrarch, poets that have nothing to do with each other, but they're in a bar and they're talking to this guy. It's sort of this satirical undertone about it that I really find beautiful, and it has this sexy quality about it. And then in Immortality, it's a completely different concept, it's a different theme that he explores, but he has this very Kunderian, I don't know if that's, if you say that, but anyway, he has this very particular style. Yeah, there's just scenes with philosophical digressions and things like that, but this one is a bit more linear. This is actually following a wife and his husband and a friend of theirs, just a whole cast of characters. We kind of jump back and forth in time. But then there's also a chapter in the middle, unrelated to any of the other characters in the book. It just drops there. This character just comes and goes, and you don't really know why, but it's great. It's just great. So Immortality obviously deals with the themes of immortality, legacy, memory again. The fact that he was already old and successful as an author probably plays a part in the fact that he wrote about it. It's about how people are remembered, and if not at all, and what is a life? Have you existed if no one remembers you? Who carries your legacy? Why do we want to leave legacies? Again, it touches upon the theme of time. And again, you have characters like Hemingway and Goethe, I think. Right. Maybe it was in this book. But anyway, they're also having a conversation in the middle, which I found just so funny. Ah, man. And it's just so good. Please read Kundera. It's just incredible. Incroyable. Mais vraiment. Bro. I love him. Love him. I will reread this at some point in my life. First, I might read all the Kundera books, and then I'm gonna reread them. I'm not joking. I will. I actually read The Unbearable Lightness of Being. I think it's still one of my favorites. I don't know, they're all so good. I cannot choose. Oh my gosh, so many new favorites. I cannot believe the amount of amazing books that I've read the past. Like, I just feel like I hit the jackpot in a way, you know? You know that feeling when you find authors that you just want to read everything of? I usually only have that like once in a while. Very reasonable. And now I had it like all the time, and it's great, but it's also frustrating because they also wrote a lot of books, but yeah, it's great, and I'm really grateful. And one of those writers is James Salter. I read 2 of his books as well. Bro! I have read first A Sport and a Pastime, and I have read Light Years, which are both novels. What I like about them is the prose. James Salter was recommended, particularly this book, Light Years, by a YouTuber that I follow, and she just praised it so much, and I understand why. This is the second one I read. I actually read this one first, but anyway, this is basically about a couple, Nedra and Viri. There's a lot of weird names in his book for some reason, but whatever. I think Viri was short for Vladimir, so then it kind of made sense in the end, but Nedra, I was like, never heard the name of Nedra before. But anyway, Nedra and Viri are a couple. They have children. They have an idyllic life. They live in a beautiful house by the river, I think by the Hudson. Maybe I'm mistaken, maybe I'm not, I don't know. But anyway, they have this beautiful life. They have people over, interesting people. Like, they're not even bland. They're really interesting people. He's an architect. I don't really know what she was. Maybe she was more like a housewife. I think she was more like a housewife. And it's just about their years together of raising their kids, and even they have a beautiful relationship with their kids. They have affairs with other people, but that almost seems peripheral. Like, what is really central is how they both grapple with the years passing as a nuclear family. It is sort of a criticism of a time, a criticism of an ideal. There's a disillusion there that's happening, and in the end it crumbles. So it's that. This is not a spoiler, because like, I knew when I started to read it that's what it was going to come down to, but I was really curious about how it would happen. Yeah, how the story would just unfold and unravel. And it really is about the storytelling skills of this guy, man. James Salter knew how to write. He really knew. One of the most underrated authors of his time, but I'm really surprised that not more people know about this author and this book. Prose is very lyrical yet simple, like short, succinct phrases, but there's a rhythm to it. So beautiful. And the other one, the first one I read of his was A Sport and a Pastime. Interestingly, the title is based on a quote that he puts in the beginning from the Quran, and it is, "Remember that the life of this world is but a sport and a pastime." ... And so, you do wonder what it means, and it is something that you meditate upon when you read the book. I've talked about this in the video with Olivia. I presented this book as something I wanted to recommend to her. It's basically a very sensual, sexual, erotic love story between two young fellows in provincial France in the 60s. There you go, there's the vibe. Immaculate summer vibes. What's weird about it though, the particularity of this steamy love affair, the rise and fall of it, is the fact that the narrator is another person. The narrator, the person who writes this story, is a different guy. How does he know all these details? How? And it is something that is confronted in the book. It's really skillfully written. He really reflects on it. There's these key sort of sentences and passages in the book where he talks about the reality of the tale that he's about to say. Like, it happened, but then again, there is a sort of universality in this sort of couple that falls in love, and then it's just so smitten and taken with one another, and the sexual pheromones just making their days long sessions of lovemaking in dark apartments, and almost getting lost in that sort of haze, and then the disillusion of when you fall in love with someone and it's very sexual and erotic, and the sort of disillusion of sort of crumbling down of that idyllic phase of the relationship when you start to know one another, and they start to become human, and their quirks start to come out. And I feel like it's really an exploration. Like, it doesn't matter whether the facts that he's relaying, of course this is fiction, but whether the facts that the narrator is relaying actually happened, if his friend actually told him about them or not. I think the point is really the essence of the universality of falling in love. It doesn't even matter how it ends between the two people, because it's like, this is the curve, this is how it goes. And he sort of dissects those moments, those tender lovemaking sessions, with the realizations that lovers have at what just happened. And so it's really poetic, but the scenes are also very interesting. The dialogues are amazing. What I love about his book is really this sort of beautiful blend of, again, in a very different way than Kundera, but this beautiful blend of philosophy and scenes. As a writer, I feel like these really imprinted on me very deeply in very different ways, and I feel like I've learned a lot from them. Oh my God, it's the last two books I want to talk about. Actually one, because I haven't read the second one, and this is the latest book I have finished. It's been a long video. I've been rambling for a long time. What can I say? There's a lot of books. Whatever. On the Calculation of Volume by Solvej Balle? I don't know how to pronounce it. This was just shortlisted recently for the International Booker Prize. At the time of the video, this video will come out, I'm not sure whether the prize will be announced. I don't know. I think it really deserved its shortlist. It was phenomenal. Phenomenal, let me tell you, it was phenomenal. It was phenomenal. The reason I picked this up, not just because the blurb was very intriguing and appealing to me, was also because there's a very beautiful and very convincing endorsement by Karl Ove Knausgaard where he says what the best novels can do is open up spaces. And this author has opened up a space and time, and it is absolutely, absolutely incredible. He said absolutely twice. The guy that I've been reading religiously for the past few months and that I want to read all his books, he said it was absolutely, absolutely incredible. Another person I follow on Goodreads whose taste I love, she has great taste, by which I mean she has similar taste. And she rated both of the first 2 installments of these books because there's more than one. This is the second one, there's 2. Again, the number 2 is very relevant here. So she rated them 5 stars and I thought, okay, fine, let us go deeper into debt and get those books. And yeah, they're good. I mean, I don't even know because I didn't read this one, but this one was good. It was amazing. It is about, now that you have had my enthusiasm about it and you don't even know what it's about, it's a time loop. It's a time loop. I love that. I love explorations of time. Tara Selter has slipped out of time. Every morning she wakes up to the 18th of November. She no longer expects to wake up to the 19th of November, and she no longer remembers the 17th of November as if it were yesterday. I love that sentence so much, and it's the sentence that she uses well in the book. She comes to know the shape of the day like the back of her hand, the gray morning light in her Paris hotel. The moment a blackbird breaks into song, her husband's surprised at seeing her return home unannounced. But for everyone around her, the day is lived for the first and only time. They do not remember the other 18th of November, and they do not believe her when she tries to explain. As Tara approaches the 18th of November, for the 365th time, she can't shake the feeling that somewhere underneath the surface of this day, there's a way to escape. And it is haunting. It is haunting, it is enchanting, it is hypnotic. I could not put this down. I could not put this down. It's unusual. The circumstances are unusual, but the character doesn't actually act like a real person, if that makes sense. But at the same time, you would think that a person could act like that. I don't know, it's weird to say, because the whole time I was reading, I was like, why doesn't she just do that? Or why doesn't she just like try a bunch of stuff? Why does she do that? Why does she just stay there for like hundreds of days, hundreds of 18th of November? Why? But at the same time, no. I mean, at the same time, it made sense. Like, everything she does makes sense. And what is particular about this is really this blend of sort of speculative fiction and philosophy again. And I love everything that relates to time. I think that the main issue of humanity is because we have a foot in and out of time, and that's why all these things are happening. But that's for another conversation. So I love this so much. So yes, be prepared for a dreamlike read. The way that the narrator talks about every day repeating itself, you really feel her slipping into a sort of trance herself, like she's slipping into a different state of consciousness almost. And the title, like On the Calculation of Volume, is something to meditate upon. Like, you're like, what does it mean? And then you realize that volume is related to time and space. You know what I'm saying? Anyway, yeah, that was, oh my gosh, I cannot wait. I haven't read all the other books from the short list, but I'm really rooting for this book already, because I know that actually, all of these books are probably going to make it to my top 10. I don't even need to make that video at the end of the year. This trumps everything for now. No, I don't know, it doesn't, because they're all super good. No, that's not true, that's not true. But damn, I didn't need another amazing book to smack me in the face. No, actually, I'm joking. Always looking for those books, and I'm really happy that literature can provide. People, I have been rambling for an hour. It's gonna be longer than the other videos, and it was a pleasure to talk to you about all these books. I think it's the last time I do this wrap-up video of 2 months. But anyway, I hope you had your lists ready, and I hope your TBR has grown. Girl, do I want to talk about these books in the comments if you want to talk about these books, if you've read them, if you haven't. Like, I've never had such a good streak of like just good reads. Oh, I feel so grateful and happy and alive. Damn. Thanks for being here. I want to cheers to you. One thing that I want to talk about as well, I add this to all of my videos recently, at least I hope I have. I don't know if I have. I'm going to be relaunching my Substack very soon, probably in the middle of this year or a bit later, I don't really know. But sometime along 2025, I'm going to relaunch my Substack. It has a name for now that will probably change. The link is down below. I suggest you go into it. I think there's like one sample of my writing in there. If you're curious, that's where I'm gonna be putting a lot of my other energy as well, soon. So see you there. Hopefully see you in the inbox, and if not, see you in these future videos. And if you're new, welcome, and please be my guest and subscribe if you want to join the ride. It was a pleasure, as usual, to talk to this camera alone in this room. Awkward, and yet I cross, reality and time and space to be on your screen right now. See what I'm doing there?
Creature comforts. Peace should come first. If I keep eating sweets like this, soon my teeth ain't gonna work. Used to sleep through love hurts, deep in slumber. Hard to bring your eyesight to see that your needs should come first. Yeah, you is a pretty thing, don't let self-pity be your only way out. Hard to hear heaven sing, but those petty strings bogging your brain down.
Fall in love with everything, exactly as it is.
Life feel like one long loop of quotidian. What's that mean? I'm just an idiot. Photoshop an image in the feed, we're the real one. All I ever wanted was some peace and tranquility. All I see is problems and the stars is a million. Mundane is beautiful, singing a silly song. Bitch, I'm the Billy Goat Gruff, and she tread on me with that old fake love. I'm enough, I'm enough, I'm enough, I'm enough. Can't you say that once? Get it in your gut. If you're a small town baby, y'all just trust. Got the gate to the world in your backyard bluff. Find a way to sit still or you won't feel none. Ain't no need for a rush, you can fall in love. While you stand in place, let it fill your lungs. Breathe it all right in, cause you ain't here long. Yeah. A simple man is pretty as anything. You should hold on to your peace. Quotidian is pretty as anything. You should hold on to your secret.